Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program interviewing Duane Kelly at his home, 7 Bondbrook Drive, Wabash, Indiana. Wednesday evening, March 26th, 1975. Okay, Duane, the first thing I'm going to ask you now is tell me your birth date and who your parents were and your mother's maiden name and all that stuff.
Well, I was born out in North Dakota in 1912 on February the 1st. Makes me 63 years old. I was born up near the Canadian border, about 35 miles from Canada, where it gets nice and cold in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. My parents are now deceased. My dad was about 82 years old when he passed away in 1970. My mother was at the age of 70 when she died in 1956.
Go ahead.
So, I came to Wabash by the way of the gamble stores, as you know.
Yeah, I think maybe we're getting a little ahead of our story. What was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Maude Adeline Pion. She was a French lady that came to the United States through Canada. Her parents were born in Canada, and that's as much as I know about that. But her family was in a town of Lakota between Grand Forks and Devil's Lake in North Dakota. My father was born in that same area, and his parents came out to North Dakota from the area around Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. His name, of course, was Tom Kelly, and I know very little about my grandparents on either side. Mm-hmm. My grandparents were, I know, gone by the time I was 10 or 12 years old. Mm-hmm. We lived on a farm from 1912 through 1926. And I have, as I've told you, several brothers and sisters, and my brothers and sisters, which are 6, and there's 5 brothers and 2 sisters, which are all still alive. Mm-hmm. I lost my mate Bernice, and my youngest sister lost her mate, but the rest of the family are all still intact. Yeah. My family lives mostly in Minnesota and North Dakota, mm-hmm. except for a couple of them that are one in Idaho and one in the California area.
Yeah. Let me, when I hold up my hand, I want to interrupt you there. Spell your mother's maiden name.
Well, my mother's maiden name was P-E-O-N, like a French Pion.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a good French name.
Yeah. Did you ever see either of your grandparents on either side of the family?
I saw both of my grandmothers, but not any of my grandfathers.
Yeah. Did your grandmother on your mother's side, did she speak French?
Yes. My mother spoke a little French. Mm-hmm. I have there's one member of my mother's family still alive, and she lives up in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and she's about in her middle 80s now, and of course I go up to see her once every summer at least.
How did we'll refer to your father as Tom Kelly, to keep them all straight. How did Tom Kelly, was he the one that came to North Dakota, or was it his parents that came out to North Dakota?
Well, my father's parents came to North Dakota, and my father was born in North Dakota.
Yeah. Now, did they homestead?
Yes, they did, up in the Lakota area. However,
you speak of Lakota. How do you spell that, and what does it mean to somebody listening to this?
Right. When I say Lakota, in North Dakota, the railroads run east and west, and every so often there's a branch line that runs up to the Canadian border in our area. Mm-hmm. And Lakota was a headquarters for a branch line. Mm-hmm. And that is a town, as I said before, between Devil's Lake and Grand Forks, one of the better small towns out there.
Yeah. Now this is where the Kellys and the Pions...
That's where it's in Lakota that my family, as I remember it, originated.
Okay, now we've got the setting.
All right, now this goes back far enough that there were Indian problems out there that my dad talked about in his younger days, mm-hmm. and he swore that they had arms stashed in churches out there for defense in case.
Yeah.
And the Indian uprisings weren't so much in North Dakota as they were up in northern Minnesota.
Right.
And there is a Indian reservation in our county down by Devil's Lake, the county seat.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Totten Indians are there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was close to this place where he came from.
Uh-huh. Did you ever hear your father talk about them coming out there to homestead this land?
No, not too much. The homesteaders, by the time that there was any homesteading land, it had all been taken care of, and he didn't talk about it and we didn't ask. Now that was a story about the homesteaders.
Yeah.
But I know how the homesteaders worked. They would come out and they would homestead a half a section, which meant 320 acres, I guess it is. And then they could plant trees on another half a section. They called that a tree claim. So they'd end up with a section of land. Mm-hmm. And that's about what it took in those early days to support a family at all. I mean, it's just sparse crops out there. And without the fertilizers of today and the mechanics of today, it took a lot of horses and a lot of machinery to exist in those days.
What did grandfather Kelly come to North Dakota to do? Farm, specifically?
Yes, he came specific to farm, and that's all he did, as I remember.
Did any other the members of his family come to the Dakotas?
I have no knowledge at all.
Yeah.
None at all.
Yeah. Okay. Now, your father grew up in this town of Lakota, and did he tell me about his education and so forth?
Well, my father grew up in this little town of Lakota, and instead of him being a farmer, he was a barber. Mm-hmm. And he made his home there. He was very active in athletics, and they had a manual firefighting system, and he was one of the main cogs in that. Could talk to for an hour the way he used to talk about that firefighting unit that they used to have, and they had some great baseball teams in those early days. Mm-hmm. And he swears that he and several guys had bowled 300 scores in bowling because back in his time they had a bowling alley in this fire hall, and the guys would go down bowl and bowl and bowl and bowl. And when I tried to tell Ashby that my dad had probably bowled 300, he said he's crazy, couldn't have.
Yeah.
But I'm just repeating a story because I never saw it.
Yeah.
This happened when I was too young.
Yeah. But he was a barber and a member of the volunteer fire department in this town of Lakota. How large was the town?
Oh, about 1,000, I suppose. But 1,000 population out in North Dakota is the same as 5,000 around here because of the outlying territory.
Mm-hmm. And the closest town, then, of any size would have been how many miles?
Well, Devil's Lake would have been the closest town of any size, which was probably 40 miles. Forks was 40 miles east of there.
Yeah. We looked at some pictures before we did this tape now, and I noticed some farm scenes. Now, where were they taken?
Well, those farm scenes were taken a little south of the town I was born in. The town was Hampden, Hampden. Mm-hmm. And there's nice flat country through there, and it's all very good farm country. There's some bad land in North Dakota, not referring to the bad lands. There's useless land in North Dakota, and there's good land. And where we were raised, it was very good land, and it turned out to be excellent land after they come in with the big machinery and the fertilizer and that type of thing.
Yeah. But whose farms were these?
Well, this picture was the farm was my father's farm. I was born on that farm.
Yeah. But he farmed and...
Well, he farmed and kept up his barber license all his life. That was just something he didn't drop even when he died. He still had a barber's license.
Still a registered barber.
Yes, he still was. That was one thing that he wanted to keep.
Yeah.
Now my mother, she was a 2-year graduate from school in Missoula, Montana. I can't tell you much about it other than that she went out there, though she made very little use of any of her education there. She was a great help to us, raising 8 children, and she was a big help to me when I went on to college.
How did your father ever meet your mother?
They just grew up as kids. That was just one of the few times, 2 people in the town.
Now, you've also, in over the years, you and I have had so many conversations, and I know your background and so forth. And tell me about going to school and where you went to school, and all the things that went on. And where did you fit in the family, by the way? Oldest, youngest?
In my family of 8 children, I was third from the top. I had my oldest brother left school when he was about to finish high school. He was mechanically inclined, and he went with General Motors eventually, and worked himself into a real good thing as a troubleshooter for the General Motors trucks out through the northwestern states. He worked through Utah and from Oklahoma to the Canadian border and clear out to the west coast, and which I felt was a rather good accomplishment for him. My next brother would be my number 2 brother, went into the barber school, and he's been a barber up in Braham, Minnesota, which is south of Duluth. He's been there for about 35, 40 years now. Then I went to college in 1930. Graduated in, of course, the spring of 1930 from high school. And my principal got me a scholarship to Jamestown College, which was worth $100. And this is back in 1930.
Big money.
The Depression hadn't hit us yet out there.
Yeah.
But it was a great thing. So I went on to Jamestown College, and I had to stay out during what would have been my sophomore year because of financial problems. It was just really tight out there. We had the Depression, and we had the sandstorms, and no crops, and just no work, and just lucky to keep body and soul together. It's a good thing we had the big gardens of our own in those days.
Yeah.
But during up through 1935, I just went down to Jamestown and got a job and worked my way through. I was going to be sitting home. It's no use to. I couldn't get work if I wanted to. So in 1935, when I graduated, then naturally I went looking for work. And let's go back while I'm still in college.
Let's go back to grade school. We'll pick up the college here. Where did you go to grade school then?
Well, I went to grade school in my little town of Hamden. We went to school on a school bus. I mean, this was a covered affair that in the summertime it was horse-drawn. And then it was on wheels in the summertime. And it would come into town from 5 miles out, which was the edge of the township. We went to a township school. And in the wintertime, they would take the bus off of the wheels and put it on a sled. And then we came to school on the sled until the snow disappeared in the spring.
And was this a one-room school?
No, this was a fairly nice school out there. I kind of like a consolidated school. However, I don't think they called it that. But we had a 4-room school, and inside toilets and
central heat.
Yeah, it had some kind of a good heating system. As I remember, there never any problems there at all.
Now this would have been in the early 20s.
Sure it was.
Yeah.
Sure it was.
Yeah.
It was a school that had all the grades in the school from 1 through the 4 years of high school is what it was. Now we had a lot of little schools around, out away from us. We were kind of up on the edge of the township, and once you got over the township, then there were smaller towns farther away, and we had some of these little 1-room schools up in there. That took in all 8 grades.
Do you remember any unusual weather conditions or anything like that, being that far north, that happened while you were in school?
Sure, I certainly do. We would have the blizzards were the biggest problem to us out there, because you could get caught in a blizzard, and of course you can't see anything in a blizzard, and you don't know where you're at, and the roads get covered over, and if you are country folk like the people that rode this bus, that was a worry every day we went to school, because the blizzard could come up in a matter of snow in the morning. By 4 in the afternoon, it was a driving windstorm, and real bad. Though I saw many 3-day blizzards while I was out there. By that I meant for 3 solid days you didn't go out of the house. If you were a farmer, now when we were on the farm, I think I told you about this, we stretched a wire from the house to the barn so you could lop your arm over the wire, and you didn't get lost out in the blizzard. That's the only way you could feed your animals.
Yeah.
And people that didn't have that just let the animals starve until they could get to them.
Yeah.
Don't know of anybody that actually lost animals that way. But in 1936, I'm getting ahead on time a little bit, but on the 19th of March, I saw the thermometer read 53 below zero on my own door sill.
With your own eyes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the official that year was given at 60 below zero. I'm talking about the same day, but the official Weather Bureau was.
Yeah.
And peculiar enough, this Hovde down here in Purdue, I guess, wasn't it? His father was the Weather Bureau operator out there in North Dakota that night.
Yeah, when they
Yeah.
world's record for North America, I think.
Well, no, that is no world's record.
For I shouldn't say world record. North American continental
No,
record.
it's cold. It's been colder than that.
Uh,
Yeah. I couldn't argue that because I don't really know. But,
Yeah.
but at least I'm talking about how cold I saw it.
Yeah.
I know another thing. When I lived on the farm, and talking about this cold weather, when it got down to 35 below zero, the wind quit blowing.
Mhm.
We'd go out and haul feed into our barn or straw into the barn as we needed for the animals. Of course, we bundled up and we were dressed for it. Our faces were completely covered except for just little eye slots, on the cloth. But we'd go out working and it wasn't so bad because you had the clothes and equipment.
Yeah.
Many times I've gone out in 35 below zero.
Did you remember any particular incident where you got stuck at school during a blizzard where they had to send?
I don't really recall any at all. I just don't. I guess if I think hard enough, I can remember a few times that some children didn't go home. We had a pretty good telephone system out there at the time, as I remember it, and you were able to call the parents and say, well, the school buses might go out halfway or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's a chance of getting through that far, and the others will stay in town.
Yeah.
But I don't recall any panic or any great serious thing that came up, which it probably did, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. Then, with completing your elementary education, you went on to high school in the town. And was this a township high school or a high school for the town, or what was it?
It was just the one high school in the townships. What it was took in the town and the country both.
And the name was?
It was just called Hamden High School. Now we would have probably an enrollment around, I think, 60 in the whole high school. And by the time the seniors by the time you got to be a senior, it'd be about 8 to 10 graduate out of per year.
Yeah.
But we'd have some good little basketball teams. We always had continuous basketball from as long as I can remember. Still is out there. But in the spring we'd have a good baseball team. In the summertime, this baseball team would play with some of the older people. We'd have independent teams, and we'd play baseball all around in that area. I could name off 15 towns that I played baseball in.
Yeah. Well, if the winters were so cold and bitter, what were the summers like out there?
Unfortunately, it can get just as hot the other way. Now, North Dakota is a very dry air state. The air itself is dry, and the humidity doesn't bother out there. So you can stand the cold better, you can stand the heat better. But I can recall 112 degrees out there during this time of the drought and extreme, there was no foliage hardly at all. So one of the things that we would see in the spring, we used to say that the people of North Dakota during the Depression believed in God and the government. They'd take out a government seed loan and plant their crop and then pray to God all summer they'd get a crop of some kind. And for about 3 years in a row they didn't. Because it started out green and then with no rain came. It just progressively got dried out till there was nothing. Just dirt, blowing dirt even.
What year did you graduate from high school then?
I graduated from high school in 1930.
And how many in the class then by this time?
I would say there was 8, and
Eight.
one of those was my brother that became the barber. So there were 6 others in my graduation class.
And what were you doing your summers? Were you working summers with,
Oh, yes.
with whom?
Everybody in summer would work in the for the farmers in the wheat fields, or in the summer he didn't necessarily work in the wheat fields. By the time school was out, especially for the kids like I was, the crops would be planted and coming up by the time school was out. But then we had what we called a haying season out there. Now this is still back in the days of animals. I mean horses. We had to put up feed for them. Yeah. And in our particular area, instead of growing clover and that type of feed for them, we had what we called hay sloughs out there. So we'd go mow these hay sloughs after they dried up around the 1st of July, and we'd put up stacks of hay up on the edges of these slough potholes, or sloughs. We used to call them slough holes. Mm-hmm. Then after that season was over, then it would be time to cut the grain. And then, of course, cutting the grain and shocking it. This is before combines. We didn't have combines at all out there. Mm-hmm. Now they do. Mm-hmm. So then we would, that would be, the haying season was about 3 weeks. Then we call it the harvest season, when they ran the binders and cut the grain and shocked it. That took nearly a month. Uh-huh. And by that time, it's time then to start thrashing machines. Uh-huh. So then we would work on thrashing machines for a couple of weeks. And of course, we had to go to school. By that time, we didn't even get permission to stay out a couple of weeks.
What kind of pay would you make?
Well, it ran from about $5 to $8 a day by the time I was involved. Which was darn good.
That was good money in the late 20s and early 30s. Yeah. Let's check our tape and give you a chance to. All right, let's talk about first of all. There's 2 or 3 things we're going to talk about. You're going to join it all together, and we're going to talk about sod houses, about airtights, stoves, and transportation and conditions of the roads and so forth, summer and winter.
Well, I recall conversation about the sod houses, the transportation, even before the railroads were actually through my own area up there. Mm-hmm. And there were still some sod houses. It's too bad they hadn't been preserved in the very area where I was at. I've been in them, I've crawled in them and played around in them. And they're very small, but what they did, they cut a strip of sod, maybe 3 feet long and 1.5 feet wide, and just stacked it like you would make an ice igloo, same thing. Mm-hmm. Some of them were kind of curved up, and of course then they filled out the top as best of whatever they could use. And the little airtight stove was, they had something else it was called a straw burner that didn't burn coal or wood, it just burned straw. And it's something made out of something on the order of a barrel. Mm-hmm. And they would stuff this barrel as full as they could of straw, light it on the top so it burned down, and it smoked up the place. About you jumped in bed, and, as I was told, and covered up your head to keep from smothered to death from the thing burning. But at least it kept heat in those early places.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what kind of a stove did you say that was?
Airtight.
An airtight stove.
Which would be on the same principle.
That's a big improvement, because if the airtight, they burned wood in it, and they filled the bottom with sand and didn't burn out, and they could put a great big chunk of wood in. Of course, this is in an area where my area up there didn't have too many trees, and they even gathered buffalo chips, if you know what that is, and stacked them and dried them. Now I remember them telling about the early days there. Of course, by the time the railroads came through, that was the end of that. But before the railroads came, I have visited with people that actually hauled their grain from 28 to 60 miles. Mm-hmm. They'd load it, and it took them days to make a round trip. There was no roads. They just went across country the bestest where they thought they could go best, because it wasn't all farmed out there. There was an awful lot of land that was just no good, so they thought, and they could travel on that type of land. And usually when you took a load of grain, then you brought back a load of supplies and always some lumber. Nobody ever came home without some lumber, because if he didn't need it, his neighbor needed it.
Yeah.
And of course, they would bring it's kind of like on a Harold Wolf system down here. They would buy a barrel of flour, which is 3 sacks of flour, and bring back a large amount of sugar, and that's probably about all they needed, because the rest of it grew it right there and knew how to put it up and preserve it. Mm-hmm.
I noticed in the one photograph that you showed me of the family sitting in the family buggy with a horse named Maude. It looked like a buckboard rather than, but nothing fancy.
Just an old-fashioned buggy. We used to load the whole family in that thing and go visiting.
Yeah.
There was a time we didn't even have a car.
Yeah. But you do remember when your father got his first car?
Oh, absolutely.
What was it?
It was a 1918 Buick.
And what were the circumstances?
Well, there were very few cars in the country, and we thought we really had something fancy there, because we'd been either traveling in a wagon or a sled, or in that old buggy you saw. And then, of course, we had that Buick for a long time. It was a touring car with a top down. Actually, I don't think they even had glass in those days. Remember the big lights and the running boards?
What kind of roads did he have to travel on?
Well, by the time we had fairly good country roads, although to keep the roads in those days, they had a tax system that you worked out your taxes by running the road grader. You would grade so many miles and you got so much credit towards your taxes. And that's what kept up the roads in those days, which was a real good thing, kind of a community thing. You had this big road grader and you had to put 6 or 8 horses on it to pull it, and took a couple of, most everybody had a son, that could go along with him, and he just graded his share of the roads, and then somebody else came, got the grader, and did their share, and that kept up the country roads. Finally, they put in some fairly decent state highways through that area, but that didn't come until around 1928.
What was your medium of communication? Was it radio, or was it the newspapers from Devil's Lake or Minneapolis or Fargo? Or
for newspapers, invariably the little towns out there had a newspaper. Most of the towns, if they were a town that had several stores, like we had, I think we had 2 grocery stores and 3 elevators, and we had a theater, and always had a pool hall, maybe a couple of them. We always had 2 or 3 hardware stores, and maybe one of the hardware stores would be a good machinery outlet. There was always at least 2 good machinery companies in there, like John Deere would be one, and International Harvester would be another. So that is a necessity in a farming area like this, and it's still good out there. I mean, that part is. The groceries, of course, the grocery stores today have changed, but we always had pretty good grocery stores, and of course the farmers charged their groceries in the spring and paid for them in the fall, and most of the grocery men were the rich people out there.
And then obviously there'd be a lumber yard in these towns.
Always a good lumber yard. There's still good lumber yards in most of the towns out there even today.
How did you get about, and say if you wanted to go to the big city, or if somebody wanted to go off to the university or something, what was the means of transportation there?
We had a passenger train service on this little railroad. Oh, it was a Great North. It was no little railroad, but we called ours the Little Railroad because it's a branch line. We had a passenger train come up every morning, go back, went up to the end of the line in the morning, came back later that day, and then connected up with the main line. And back when I was, before the automobile was very popular out there, there were a lot of passenger trains. You could just go down and catch a passenger train 4 or 5 times a day, either direction, at the main line.
Which was what town?
Lakota. So I went going back to Lakota.
Yeah.
And when the radio came in, we were close to Winnipeg, so we got Winnipeg pretty good. And for some reason,
We were talking about the radio.
the radio out there, the main stations that we got would be Winnipeg and Grand Forks and Devil's Lake, kind of in the middle of that. And there was an awful lot of farm news. And when I was a child or a young man, they seemed to want the farmer to know what every little bit of price change there was. And I can remember it's just as bad as advertising on television today. They were giving you the grain markets,
Yeah.
which was nice. And I can remember we were fortunate enough to have one of the very first radios in the town, and it was earphones, and we only had one set of earphones, so we just divided the thing, and two people could listen by holding one to their ear, and the neighbors would come over. They think that's just great.
Yeah.
And there were several people that tried to make little crystal sets, but they wouldn't work out there that I know of.
Well, when we graduate from high school and you receive a $100 scholarship to go to Jamestown College, right? And
It's a Presbyterian. Jamestown College was a Presbyterian college. It is a Presbyterian college, still is in operation, and it had a rating in North Dakota with the AC and Agricultural College and the university. It was one of the three most accredited colleges, which didn't mean anything to me. I just wanted to go to college, and I would have gone anywhere, just so I could make the grade. So it was awful tough for me. I mean, I was used to a little school, and I swear that some of the kids from the big high schools knew more at the beginning of the year on a course than I did at the end of the year, because in my little school we just didn't cover things properly, like I found out once I got away from home. But I always said one of the nice things about going to college was it broke my home ties. It gave me an idea there's a great big world out there, and I want to find out what it's all about.
was this coeducational?
Oh, yes, it was coeducational, and my wife was Bernice Clenk was her name, and
Spelling.
Klenk.
Yeah.
And in this college where I was at, in so many places you sat alphabetical. And Kelly's and Clenk sat together for a couple of years before we knew each other was sitting there.
Yeah.
And then finally a romance developed, and of course my life changed.
Where was she from?
She was from a small town near Jamestown called Spiritwood, 10 miles east of Jamestown on Highway 10 was where she was born, and her parents were from southern Minnesota, down near or west of Albert Lee. Now I know that a lot of kids when they go to college think they want to get into the big athletic affairs. So naturally I decided I was going to play football. Unfortunately, I had size against me. I weighed 135 pounds and no experience at all. So I decided I would go out for football. And it didn't work out very good. So after about the 5th game, I turned in my suit.
This one, freshman year?
This is my freshman year. So I had very little to do. In athletics, I was too short and not swift enough for the basketball team. And they had a baseball team, and I got to be a sub-pitcher on the baseball team, but they dropped baseball that year. So then from then on, I couldn't play baseball, though they've installed it since. So I was kind of sick about that. Then I stayed out what would have been my sophomore year.
For what reason?
Lack of funds. I was able to work a little and save a little money, very little. And I figured at least I can get down and get it installed and find a room somewhere, and I can work for the room if I have to, and I can maybe get a job in a restaurant for my eats or something like that. So that's the way it worked out. But I want to cover my athletic here. That turned out great. This school requires so many credits in athletics or that type of thing, and I signed up for a tumbling class, and of course I was too clumsy and I kept lighting on my back that I couldn't walk. So I went to the college doctor and said, well, that's simple enough. He's a friend of mine. I had stayed next door to him at one time and knew his kid real well. So he said, I'll just give you a slip, take it back to the school, and you don't have to attend that class anymore. So then I went down to the handball court, which I found I liked very much, and I had a couple of periods every week to go down and play, and soon found some other guys that were around that time. And when our tournament came on that year, which was after the basketball season and before baseball, little space in there, we had this runoff on the handball. Now, this is my sophomore year. And the guys said, well, I was gaining enough knowledge and ability that I had a chance to win the tournament. There was just one certain guy that I had to be aware of because they were sure he was going to win it from his previous experience. So I played with the guy quite a bit. Just he wanted to show me that he was superior and, have me psyched before I went into play. But I decided that I shall not build his left hand up at all. And I played with him, and played him very little left-handed stuff. And then we got in the tournament. I just left-handed him right out of the tournament. He couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was beat before he got his senses back. Because you play up to 21,
Yeah.
In the first game, you thought, well, gosh, that's a fluke.
Yeah.
Next thing you knew, it was 17 to 4 or 5, and he thought, this kid, he said, this turkey can fly. They told me he couldn't. So after that, I won the tournament the next 2 years in a row. 3 years in a row. So at least I have one thing.
You were the college handball
I was
champ.
a college handball champion. Never was before, and hasn't been since.
Yeah.
That's the end of my athletic prowesses.
Then you graduated with a degree in what?
I had a BA degree in education and business. And I intended to teach school. But I found out that school jobs weren't so plentiful. And unable to get a job, I went to work in a grocery chain store, the Red Owl, which was a very new operation.
You're still strong on that area.
Oh, well, they eventually joined with Gamble's, And they're very strong now, exceptionally strong. But anyway, I worked with them then from until about the middle of January the following year, which would have been, by this time, 36. I graduated in the spring of 35. And it was this terribly bad winter that we were talking about, the 53 below zero. And in my town, not one car went through the main street from 1st of November until I don't know when, the spring.
Which town were we
This is the town of Hamden.
Yeah, that's where you were
That's
operating.
my hometown.
Yeah.
The snowdrifts, there was a 25-foot snowdrift right at the edge of one of the buildings, which was a cross street. It was there all winter. Just was.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't drive a car.
Yeah.
Everybody came to town with their little horse and sleds. And back in those days, all the farmers had horses. And of course, I don't know what's happened now. You see, they've learned something about transportation out there that wasn't when I was there. They build all the highways up high so that there's a wind sweep across them. And they have snow fences around to help direct the snow so that you can still take a car down the road because it sweeps clean. And that wasn't the condition when I was there. See, that has been changed. So it's all horses in those days. Well, anyway, in 1936, I went back to my hometown, my folks, and I said, I'm not going to stay here.
You didn't have a job?
I went back home without a job. There was an opportunity for a couple of things there that my mother told me afterwards that they had talked to her about, and she thought, well, I went to school to learn to be a teacher, and there's no darn sense in me not being a teacher. Sometime. I did substitute work during this period that I was home then for a few weeks. And every time I earned a nickel, I kept it. So on about the 21st of March, I got on the railroad and went out of that snow area down to the town of Lakota, and I went down to Devil's Lake on a bus. We went through snowdrifts that were a half mile long, one car wide, because they have rotary plows out there. And I called on everybody in Devil's Lake looking for a job, not even a peep. So then I went back down to Jamestown, went down by bus again. And I spent a week there. I couldn't see anything there, so then I went to Fargo. That's the large town out there, and I put a piece in the paper, and I spent about 2 weeks there. Calling on anything that I could and hoping that I would get somebody who would call me, which didn't happen. From there I went to Minneapolis. And my brother was down there, and I stayed with him. He was taking up his barber college work to get his barber's license. But while I was working in the grocery store, I had applied at the Gamble stores. I'd fill out an application, and turned it into them. And this was probably in October or something like that, because it looked like a little better opportunity than this grocery store. Anyway, I was into Minneapolis and stayed with my brother, and had some money, but I always figured I better keep enough back so I can get back at least, whether eat or not, getting back out home, I can at least get out there.
Yeah.
Go home, you know. This is still pretty tough times. So after spending, I suppose, 2 weeks or more, probably longer than that. Well, anyway, I was getting down pretty close to, it was the last of April, 1st of May about. And I was getting discouraged, this could be in Minneapolis, and thought, well, why fool around here any longer? I'm a burden on people, so I'm about to go home, and I figured this just dawned. I might go and see that gamble organization. I had applied with them, and why not go see? They have something. So went up there and asked for the personnel manager. And they said, yes, come on in, you'll see him. Told him who I was, and said I was in Minneapolis looking for work, and I had applied with him. And he said, yeah, I know you had. He said, he just opened up the door, hadn't had my application there in a folder. He said, we had approved your application, but you had stated on there your preference was to work in North Dakota. There wasn't any openings out there, so we had written to you, and there was a letter at home. But of course, my folks had just kind of lost contact of where I was, you know, all the time I was out looking for work. Because I'd send them a card and say I'm going on, you know, not staying anywhere in particular. So they said I had an opportunity to get out to Clinton, Iowa. I said, hand it to me, I'll go. So I immediately turned the other way. Instead of going back out northwest, I went down southeast, down to Clinton, Iowa.
That's where you started your business.
Then I
career.
started, that's when I really started with the gamble stores. And then I stayed with them for 13 years.
Okay, now we're going to talk about these, we're going to talk about the hay stacks, is that what you call them? Straw?
Let's talk about the farm.
Yeah, let's-
era during the
Yeah,
Depression.
let's talk what was going on there in the farm, and we'll talk about
real
the straw
tough
piles.
times,
And
the real tough times
Yeah.
that we ran into in the early 30s. Of course, there was a depression on, and that was bad for everybody. But if you were a farmer out in the farm states, you had two other plagues that came along. One of them was grasshoppers, and the other one was the drought. And the drought kept on for must have been 4 or 5 years before they got a decent crop. I think the last decent crop we had was in 1930, the fall of 1930. And 31 wasn't so good, and 32 got quite bad. Now, one thing that was noticeable with the grasshoppers. Let's talk about grasshoppers. And a lot of people have no idea how a grasshopper can do the tremendous damage he does, or how many there are. When the grasshoppers were at their peak, you'd stand in the shadow of a building and look up just a little near to the sun, not at it. And as far up as you could see would be grasshoppers. Just looked like they're 6 inches apart. And then at night they would all come sit down on whatever they could. Fence posts were the first thing that were covered. Machinery just everywhere they could land. In the morning they'd fly, and of course they'd light out on the grain. Now the grasshopper sucked the juice out of the stem below the head of wheat. He didn't eat the kernels or anything. He would gnaw a little chunk out of the stem. And I suppose he'd suck the juice. But because he gnawed the stem a little, it was weak. The wind then whipped the head of wheat and just broke it off, and it fell to the ground. And this stalk would stick up about 6-8 inches above the heads of wheat. And it was amazing how many wheat heads had fallen to the ground. Really. Just most discouraging. Now the government took care of the grasshoppers eventually by poisoning. Grasshopper lays his egg in soil, and it's not in the soil it's worked, it's on fence rows and unused soil. And that was the way they eventually licked the grasshoppers, just by pest control.
Yeah. Would these grasshoppers ever fly into town and devour?
Oh, they didn't bother anything like that. No, I've heard of them eating clothes on the line and everything else, but though I've saw an awful lot of grasshoppers, I never saw any damage done like that. However, crickets are a mean little thing that are kind of a nuisance at times, and I think during this Depression days or the drought days, even the crickets were bothersome out there.
Yeah.
Now they just climb in and eat anything, clothes or anything that you get into, which was a nuisance. But I don't know why crickets weren't such a. We just had them all the time. It seemed like.
Describe that operation now on the straw.
Okay, now we talk about the. What am I trying to think of the word now? The drought.
Right.
When I first went down to college, I went 155 miles directly north and south across the state. And going across at night in the fall, you would see where the farmers were burning their unused straw, which now the thrashing and back in that day was before the combine, and straw ended up in a pile at the end of the thrashing machine operation. And every farm would have maybe from 10 to 25 straw piles. And it was the policy out there to just burn them at night. The reason they burned them at night was because there was enough dew on the stubble or in the fields that it didn't start a prairie fire. So they didn't burn them in the daytime, burn them at night. Wait until the dew had set, and everything is damp. Except this dry straw. Once that takes off, that'll just burn clear down, and it's loose. It burns very, very much complete. But I can recall that there were literally hundreds of straw piles burning every night, all until, way late snow time almost, trying to get rid of the straw. They didn't want it. It's good for nothing. You couldn't give it away. Well, now, this was in the fall of 1930, but in 1931, our drought was starting to set in. And there were fewer straw piles, but people still thought, well, we burn them anyway. And a few kept some straw. And some of those that kept their straw, it would get 4 or 5 years old. He still kept it, because he still sold it then. He didn't know he could, but he did. And after, I'd say, the 30, there wasn't any burned at all. Not any. Because there wasn't enough to really harvest it to do any good.
Yeah. Would the animals, when the Depression got worse, as it worsened, the Depression, would the animals be fed off the straw pile then?
Well, the straw pile was a source of feed in the winter time for the animals to just go out and help themselves. And then, of course, there was feeding done in their shelter barns. But when we talk about feeding animals in North Dakota, it's not for butchering and that type of thing, because the animals that are raised out there were sent down east for fattening up. And it was just too cold out there to fatten animals. But one thing that did happen in the summertime, how grazing was good in the spring, and good up until maybe a little after the 4th of July. And by that time, the pastures that normally had grass or clover or something in them had nothing practically. And the cattle would graze so close to the ground that one time they discovered animals were dying for no reason they couldn't understand. They opened them up. They were carrying sand and little stones in their bellies that they just picked up with their grazing. Enough to kill them. So that had to be corrected. I mean, that was another thing that came along that bothered. So,
how about the sandstorms then, or dust storms? Dust storms, I guess.
well, dust storms you'd call them, as we would get dust storms really twice a year. We would get them in the spring because the land has all been nicely plowed, and during the drought years, the warm winds came up through there way early in the spring and took the moisture out of the ground. We just sucked it out. And when we get a real bad storm, I was seeing while I was still in college that you couldn't see. It was just like say 11 o'clock at night, right in the middle of the day. It was just almost like a snow blizzard is what it was. Then, it seemed like after they were over, then we'd get them again in latter part of the summer because the crops had dried out. More strong winds.
Now, during these years, the farmers were actually losing their crops, and
Go in the hole all the time.
Yeah.
They really were.
what was happening to your dad's farm then?
Well, we had disposed of our farm. We didn't have a farm by this time, you see.
Mhm.
Somebody else had it. And it just seemed that the farmers stayed on the farms. Some moved, some didn't. I suppose like some of the Okies went somewhere, but the majority of the people seemed to just stay there and just live it out. Of course, one thing about the latter part, well, even during those years that were so bad, I was actually down at college, and I was getting kind of away from what was actually happening at home, other than I knew. I was born there, knew everybody.
Yeah.
Knew there were some more going to school and getting jobs and down to Twin Cities and wherever they could get them.
What was happening in college? Was the enrollment dropping and they were tightening the belts and so forth?
Well, we had a feeling in college that our enrollment, it wasn't too large a school, about 450. And it remained constant practically all the time. We had about the same number of students, and for some reason or other, they seemed to, well, once a guy started, he didn't drop out. I mean, he didn't have to leave because of finances. I did recognize the fact that some fellows tried to go to college and didn't come back. And we assumed that because they were on the same list as I was without sufficient funds, you know.
Yeah.
What they did later, I don't know. But I know a number of boys that did come back.
How did you supplement your income in college? Did you join the National Guard or anything?
Oh, I joined the National Guard, and it didn't amount to much. It was $1 a meeting. But that $1 a meeting, in those days, $1 was a lot of money. And
What company did you join, and how long did you stay? And
actually, it was Company H in Jamestown, I believe it was.
that was
It was the National Guard with Captain Robert Hall, which turned out to be one of your old buddies.
Yeah. And this was 164th Infantry.
Yeah. That's what it was. And, well, I was in it for, I was in 3 years, of course. And after I left college, and I got an honorable discharge, and that was the end of my National Guard experience.
Most of the kids were college students in those days, weren't they?
Well, no. I suppose that we probably had, let's say, probably 20% of them were in the Guard. Yeah.
This was a rifle company, of course. And
No, it was a machine gun company.
Machine gun company,
Yeah,
yeah.
it had a machine gun company.
Did you go ahead.
We would go up to Devil's Lake to Fort Totten to camp, and we'd always put in 2 weeks there, which I did. And while I was up there, I was a cook a couple of years because the college kids got very few promotions. See, they weren't there enough.
Yeah.
The promotions went to the people there all the time,
Yeah.
which was great. But we could, if we wanted to take a cook's job, we could get up a notch or two and better pay, a little nicer work. And if you're his first or second cook, the other guys did the work, and you just told them what. Well, it was rather fun. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Did when you get out of the Guard, then it was time to get out of college, and
By the time when I got out of college, I gave up the Guard. Of course, I went to work in the grocery stores.
Okay, now I think we brought your career up to Clinton, Iowa. We haven't gotten married yet, have we? No. Well, let's go to the Gamble experience in Clinton, Iowa.
Well, there was a opening in Clinton, Iowa, which I immediately took, and it looked like a good future. I was satisfied. I was happy with it. We were started out in 1936, $70 a month, and that was by the month. Not if it was a 28-day month, that's what it was. 31-day month, that was what it was. We just $70. So I started there in May, and in the middle of the summer, August the 12th to be exact, Bernice Clink and I were married, and we were married there in Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
But she went back and taught school for 1 year in North Dakota. Now, she had been teaching school when she got out of college, so she actually taught 2 years up in North Dakota, that year and the year before, when I was with the grocery store. But she thought the place was with her husband. And she worked in some of the dime stores there, did some substitute teaching. And one day I got a call that said, "You're transferred to Traverse City, Michigan." Now, this was probably in the neighborhoods of 2 years after I got there, because I worked in 3 stores for a total of 7 years and 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
No, 7 years and 6 months it was. So, as far as I don't know just the exact amount, but anyway, I went up to Traverse City, and having been raised out in North Dakota where there was good farmland, and in Iowa where it was excellent farmland on the Mississippi River. See, when I was in Clinton, I recall the vegetable gardens up and down the river. It was kind of nice there. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of nice park areas, and there were river boats that came to Clinton, and everything was cheap, but it didn't cost very much to do anything. Go down to Davenport, Rock Island, Quad Cities down there. There was always beautiful parks to go to, and nice parks along the river. Enjoyed Clinton, except for the humidity. That didn't bother me, but sure bothered Bernice. She was literally sick when we left Clinton for Traverse City. Mm-hmm. We weren't up in Traverse City 2 weeks till she couldn't believe that the air had done a remarkable change. Mm-hmm. Even though it's all sand and lakes up at Traverse City, the air's dry anyway. Mm-hmm. It just is. But I was noticing the farmlands. We went up to Traverse City. Now, they had been through depression and all kinds of catastrophes in the early 30s, too. Mm-hmm. And it was just abandoned apple orchards and the little run-down farms all the way along the, I'd say, the northern third after you leave Indiana, going to Traverse City. I thought, boy, I hate this. Didn't think I'd like it there at all. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't there very long till I found that was another place that was for anybody that liked to go picnicking. And there tourists came there and spent money good, and business was good in the summertime especially, and what you lost in the summertime or wintertime, you made it up in the summer. I enjoyed Traverse City. I'd like to stay there. Mm-hmm. But I was working myself up the ladder. I got to be an assistant manager by the time I left there. And
was your pay going up?
Well, my pay finally got up to $1,000 a year. I was at Traverse City. I thought, boy, I'm rich. Bernice was working at stores and doing some substitute teaching, and we had a real nice apartment. We were probably living over our heads, but we were at least getting along very well. Getting nowhere, but at least, it looked like our future was working itself along. Mm-hmm. And then the next, well, you know what Traverse City is. Traverse City is in the sports area. Mm-hmm. What we sold in our stores out west, we'd sell the same merchandise at all. We sold fishing, hunting, and boating, and all that kind of stuff. That's what we sold in the store up there. Uh-huh. Very little of the real old hardline merchandise that we did in our other stores. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what they do up there now, but that was what was there. And I remember the festivals, the Cherry Festival, when here's a town of 10,000 in the wintertime.
Part 3, Duane Kelly. We were talking about your Traverse City experience now with Gamble.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the fishing and hunting.
Right.
Then I was getting to the about the Cherry Festival.
Right. What year would this have been?
This would have been
before World War II?
Yes, this was probably about 1938 there in that area. Yeah. And anyway, getting to the Cherry Festival, which is a big thing. It's like the Holland Tulip, only when I say their summer population would be 20,000, there'd be 100,000 people come to this Cherry Festival every day, and it'd be on for several days.
Good for business.
Oh, you just couldn't believe it. Some of the fancy, well, I think we had the, what was it, is this Clydesdale horse
Budweiser?
Budweiser's
Yeah.
horse group
Right.
there, for one thing. And I remember years ago, Franken was a beer company
Right.
that Art Grabner knew about it.
Right. Yeah,
They had
Michigan.
some big dogs. I can still see the Frankenmuth dogs. Nobody seems to remember them at all, but I do. They were on a big platform, and they were drawn by, well, I guess it was a truck, but it was a very impressive thing anyhow. And of course, they would have a 3-hour parade every day
Yeah.
during the festival when I was there. I kind of hated to lose out on that.
Yeah.
Although
Were you transferred then?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was transferred after being there approximately 2 years again. Then I was transferred down to Adrian, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting closer to the wartime. You see, after I'd been in Adrian as assistant manager, and I thought I ought to have a store, which I didn't get. I used to say to the supervisor, "What's the matter? Why not?" One thing happened to me while I was there. I suppose during the second full year I was there, they had a managers meeting in Chicago. And my manager says, "You've been fighting Chicago." And I go, "Oh boy, that's awful nice to take the managers there." And that's all he said. So when we got there, with hundreds of guys, it was a big meeting. Guys come out on the stage, and make their first little presentation. Then they pulled the curtain back, and there was a bunch of names up there on a great big backboard. Mine was on there. I was tied for number 18 out of 10,000 guys for sales for the previous year.
Uh-huh.
So that was one thing that was in my favor, you see.
Was there a prize?
Wasn't any prize or anything. It's just, I was just given a bouquet for
Good
production.
salesmanship, yeah.
Production, you see, that was the thing. Of course, there were a lot of things a lot of reasons why it was that way. It wasn't, nobody ever heard the full story on it. Of course, you don't care about it here. But anyway, that was one reason I thought I'd have a store, too. Of course, they were thinking about giving me a store. As the war started in 41, I think December 7th was when it was really quite bad. And they figured that my age, they weren't going to give me a store because I was going to be drafted.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I wouldn't get taken anyway. So I even tried to enlist. I tried to enlist in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
The Navy looked me over and said, "We don't want you unless you get that thing sewed up." And I said, "Well, I'm going to sew it up." What? It was kind of a bad one, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I just left it. And I finally got drafted. And I got put in, 1A, that's what it was. 1A, limited service.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to go?
No.
Never had to
Never
go?
had to go.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't believe I got put in 1A. I got put in some kind of a draft that they figured that I wouldn't get called.
Yeah.
And then I came down then I was transferred down here as manager.
To Wabash?
Yeah. Jay Lippold was manager at the time, and he was transferred into the Army.
Yeah.
They need somebody here experienced, I guess. But then, for some reason or other, my name came up again. And then I got in that 1AL, and I almost got it, but they finally decided. By that time, I got up to 29. They weren't taking anybody 29 over.
Yeah. Well, where was the store then when you came here?
When I came to Wabash, I came to the Wabash December the 10th, 1943. No, 42, because the war started in 41.
Right.
In 1942, yeah. And the store at that time was for the now parking lot of the bank, to the south of the bank. It was next to DeRosa's
Candy kitchen.
Candy Kitchen, and Stephanada's shoe parlor was next there, and then on the other side was, well, actually, the ration board was in the room next to me. And we were in a single room, and eventually we doubled the space, and the ration board moved out, and then we doubled our store during that period.
What kind of goods were you selling? Here we are in the 43. The war's been on for a couple of years, and
Well,
domestic goods should have been short. What were you selling?
well, we sold sort of not just the usual thing. We sold one thing that we got into was furnace business. We sold a lot of furnaces. For no reason at all, we did. Another thing that we got involved in was roofing, and we sold a lot of that. I think we sold 10 carloads of roofing one summer.
Was it available?
It was.
Yeah.
And so were the furnaces available. They were considered very critical.
Yeah.
Furnaces were. Anybody could want to sell a furnace. They had to sign a form, but anybody could get it. And we sold a lot of furnaces. Another thing, we sold quite a few Quonset huts. Quonset buildings.
Yeah.
And then,
Any of them still standing?
oh yeah, sure. I suppose I sold something like 10 of those Quonset huts. And I think I put in 125 furnaces.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, that big house at Bert did.
Yeah. What kind of volume were you doing in those days in the store?
Well, I think our very highest volume was about 125,000.
Was management apparently satisfied with the operation?
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much. We had a tremendous net profit there. Just did.
Of course, those were the years for good net profit.
It really was. And I had a lot of bouquets from the company. Got balled out a lot, too. But one of the crazy things I did I tell you about the sleds? Well, during the war, sleds were kids' play sleds. Christmas time was something nobody had. It wasn't one in the county. Hadn't been. And our company said, why don't you get some sleds? Sent us this requisition order. Now, they'll give me 10% of whatever order, so I ordered 500. I think, well, I'll get 50, that's all. So one day, one of Brown's truckers came in and said, what do you want to do with those sleds? And I said, oh, just put them back there in that corner there. And he said, what do you mean that corner? He said, you got a carload of them. I said, well, you're crazy. I had 500 sleds, no kidding. Well, they came in about the middle of November, I guess, and fortunately we had a lot of snow. Another thing, fortunately, it wasn't a sled in the country, just me.
Yeah.
And 17 sleds left when Christmas was over.
Yeah.
17 sleds. The other thing I did that was, I got bawled out about, I wrote to the manufacturer for 24 refrigerators one time, right correct, and they sent them to me.
They sent them to you, huh?
I sold every one of them in 3 hours' time.
Full profit in those days.
Oh, heck yes. I didn't sell. I had it. Well, everybody were taking deposits. You were too, remember?
Yeah.
Well, I had taken 12 deposits. I figured I was getting only one a month. That was my allotment. I got in 25 refrigerators. My allotment, 24 more. So the guy came in, same guy, and Brown said, call for me, you know. He said, what do you want to do with all those refrigerators? I said, what do you mean all of them? I got one coming. I just saw the statement. He said, oh, gosh, you're wrong there. He said, you got a whole carload. I said, I'd forgotten about ordering. Didn't think it would work. I'd found this out from some of our store meetings with the other guys. They'd been getting away with this on a few things, you know. But they were doing it with small items.
Yeah.
I called Al Glazer and I called other people. And they called you folks and said that I had 13 refrigerators that weren't spoken for. But I called the 12 on my list. Every one of them took a refrigerator. Every one.
Yeah.
And then with the other people that found out I had them, it didn't take long to get the other 13. And it was funny the way we sold them. Of course, all the 12 I had, I checked them out right away. So I knew they were all right. You know, refrigerator anyway. That day, you could buy it for $165 and get 200 from guys that didn't want to wait, you know.
Yeah.
No problem there. So after I called Brown and asked him if he could have the truck come back later today, and we'd unload them. So we took the refrigerator out and just set them in the house. Never touched it once. That'll be back in the morning and unload it. Because I got to get them off the railroad.
Yeah.
Everybody believed that. I suppose I didn't have to. But next day I came back, every one of them was uncrated and running. Nobody's going to wait for me.
Yeah.
That did. I ran a big week that week.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What kind of money were you making then when you hit the Wabash operation?
Well, I don't remember just what it was, but I know one thing. I never got paid for what I thought I should have.
Yeah.
I mean,
You were running behind us.
you know.
How long did you stay then with Gambles here in Wabash?
Well, about 6 years I spent with them here. And actually, I know I've told you before, but we had this store up the #1 place in 18 stores.
Mm-hmm.
And it should have, I mean, I should have got some consideration. After I finally told them I'm going to quit, they invited me into Minneapolis, offered me a store bigger and better, and was trying to keep me. I thought it was kind of nice. I was flattered anyway, but I didn't take it because I already had a job with Glacier. Bernice had a setup in Miss Honeywell coming up.
Yeah.
But about all it was kind of a hand-to-mouth deal. I mean, what we earned, we spent. We belonged to Country Club, and we had a saddle horse that we took to the state fair, and we were kind of living it up, you know, and enjoying life. We were the right age for it, and come home, mow the yard, race around, mow the yard, and take the horse out and ride him for. Well, we had 2 horses to start with, and we'd take them out in the country for long rides. And then when we got the show horse, we'd go out to Fred Collins's place, and we'd take him out and train him then till it got too dark to see him. Do the same thing the next night. Every weekend we went somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, we had a great time with that. Oh.
But you decided to quit, and then what did you do?
Well, I was going to open the store on my own. I thought I was going to furnish business, which didn't come out that way. I asked Alan Glazer if he knew of any store builders, and he said no. But he said, I tell you, George Morris leaving me, and I'll have an opening there. He said, how about you coming over here? So I think probably my best salary is about $4,300 with Campbell, which was pretty rotten. It was.
Here we are from 1949 by this time.
No, we aren't. It's 48 in June that I left Gamble.
Yeah, you'd hit $4,800 and
Now $4,300.
$4,300, and you were the manager.
Oh heck, and I was all the time. Yeah.
So Alan,
I think probably I might have got a little bonus and stuff in there that would have brought it up maybe to $4,500.
Yeah.
It's the tops. Yeah. But anyway, I was looking for a place around the town, and he said that he had this opening. He said, well, what do you think you make when you do open? So I said, well, probably $5,000 without any argument there if I was lucky at all. I'm talking about what I'd make, you know, like beef clear salad. Hell, if you want to work for me for that, he said, I'll give you that to start with. And he said, I'll give you increase right away too. He said, after get going. So I went over there, and Bernice went with Mrs. Honeywell, and I wasn't with Alan any time till the whole picture changed. I mean, God, he upped my salary. Now, when I was with Gambles, we'd get about a $5 a month raise. Well, how much is that a week? $1.25.
Yeah.
Alan said, could you use $15 a month raise? And I said, I said, are you kidding? So he said, yeah, I might have make it what he was. So I wasn't waiting very long. I did $7,500. I just went to state there, but then he died.
Yeah. Well, was that sudden?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, to the extent of 4 months or 5 months, something like that.
Yeah. Were you managing the whole store, or just still selling appliances?
No, I was just on. I didn't do any work at all. No, I did very little selling. I just ran the store. I think mostly wanted me there to keep money still.
Who else was working in the store at the time?
At the time, Glenn Brunn and Berm Paul and Frida Rice. And let's see, Williams. We used to call him Skid Williams, but anyway, Williams for him. And we had we had 2 fellows on delivery, and we had Berm Paul at the lathe business out of these 3, and we had 3 salesmen, and then myself.
When Alan Glazer died, then did you know that was the end of the line, or?
Well, I didn't think it was. I assumed now the powers that be. You see, Alan had a partner, and Alan had lost his wife the year before. Bob is 10 years old at the time, and the people that I could talk to include Plummer that was handling. He was a lawyer that I would be allowed to try my luck for a year with the store, which I he had thinking of. And Alan's father was there, although he wasn't much help, you know.
Yeah.
But his father was still alive. And he was for a long time. Of course, Alan's mother that stayed with Bob till he got married. I'm sure she was. Old man Glacier died along the way somewhere, but the old lady, she just kept going on forever.
Still is.
Is she still alive?
Yeah, I'm sure she is.
Could be. I don't know. Anyway, she's probably down in Indianapolis with Alan's sister. Alan had a sister, you know? That's in the drug business. Anyway, it seemed that the powers that be decided that if they would buy out George Moore's store and put him back in as manager. See, he had run the store before, and it looked like a little more sound operation than me.
Yeah.
So I quit before the end of the year. They were going to let me stay to the end of the year. I just quit anyway. But picked up the building then from Arts up on the hill.
And that's
when I started my own thing.
Yeah.
I rented it in 1951 on December the 1st.
yeah. And then you continued in business until
And then I stayed in there until December the 14th, 20 years later.
Yeah.
20 years and 2 weeks.
Okay, and that pretty well covers your business career. Then you were basically still in the merchandising of furniture and appliances and laundry equipment and everything up until the end of your business career, which ended what year now?
December the 14th, 1971.
Yeah. And so you've really been out for a little better than 3 years. Okay. Now, some of the interesting thing is, let's talk about Bernice's career. Now, here you are, you're a businessman on the rise and everything else, and Bernice has really never gone back to teach school, has she? With the education and everything?
I think, as far as Bernice was concerned, she might have had a few substitute days here in Wabash, but very few.
Yeah.
She worked a little while in the office in the Honeywell factory. And then she came over and worked in the store with me, because I couldn't get help to save my neck. So that gave a chance for somebody to look after the interests of the store while I could be out selling my major appliances, you see, and my roofing and furniture and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So she worked there at the store then for a number of years. But we both decided to leave Gambles at the same time. We did it in June of 1948. And Mrs. Honeywell had wanted a successor to her private secretary, and the private secretary also did other work in the newspaper, in the headquarters.
Who was she succeeding in?
Oh, gosh, I know her real well, too.
The woman had died? Or?
No. She went into politics, went up the courthouse.
So,
went in as just starting to do whatever she could, to be as useful as she could. And I think after she was with Mrs. Honeywell for about a month, she became very aware that her job meant Mrs. Honeywell's happiness. That she devoted herself for 20 years to make Miss Honeywell happy. And during that time, I got to know Mrs. Honeywell very, very well. I mean, on a very close, friendly basis. I was in her house many times, and she was in our house many times. And there was times that Bernice and Mrs. Honeywell would be working with the Wabash Music Society and setting up the program of the night. And I would pick up Mark and take him down, and we'd sit together at the performances. I've done that several times. That's what I was telling you about up at your place one day. And Mark stopped a time or two to visit with me in my store at different times. I thought it was kind of flattering to me.
Did you and Mark have any common ground?
No.
you, like when the two of you would go to a musical program or something, what would you discuss? Or what would you talk even to keep things going?
Just about business, and he told me about some of his inventions, and one of them that he said he didn't even patent was a refrigerator control. He showed me, I had a grand opening one night, and he stopped in for about a half hour after he'd come from work, and he said, you know, I actually have a patent for that control on that refrigerator. But he said, so did somebody else, and it would have meant a lawsuit, and he said, I didn't need it anyway. So he said, there was one thing that I did develop that I didn't go on with it. So he said, that meant the other fellow had been making them for the industry.
Yeah.
Now, whether he did it personally, but the way he talked, he personally had designed that thing.
Yeah.
So it would work. That was one of the things.
You told me something interesting one time, and we're going to jump back and forth now on this Honeywell story. You told me something interesting about the time that Mrs. Honeywell went to New York to sell the bonds, or was that the... Yeah, I know that's part of... Everybody's gone now, and I think it's part of history here as to what went on.
Well, that what you just mentioned is where Bernice's job got more important to the operation. And Mrs. Honeywell developed more confidence in her, and the Nixon newspaper organization were buying other newspapers and enlarging, and Mrs. Honeywell invariably was involved, and she was on boards in schools and musical affairs in New York, which I don't recall the names, but I know she was, and she would go down there quite often, and she was a great one. If she said she'd be somewhere, she was, no matter what. You know, one thing I'd like to say is about her trip to China, which she probably maybe shouldn't even say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shut it off. To go to China, I would have gone. There'd been nothing in the way, but this was. She said,
How about the... we're getting off the track on this.
you want to go back to that?
To the New York story.
Well, as time passed, Bernice became more working herself into a more...
Trustworthy.
That's right, yeah. She was,
Confidant.
that's right. And the same way with the mechanics of the newspapers, too. I mean, the things that had to do with the headquarters. You see, the Nixon newspaper runs all the rest of them. They're all considered headquarters for them. And that's what she and Willard Rohr worked together in that. I mean, Willard was the boss, and she was his assistant, is the way I put it, and that went on for a number of years. And each year went by, and it just became more involved and more involved and more involved. But anyway, one time they needed a bunch of money to buy a newspaper. They wanted to sell some stock through one of the brokerage houses in New York City. In fact, I think that time Mrs. Honeywell went to Europe. Anyway, she was going to be out of town, and she said, now, Bernice, we're going to have the money on such and such a day, and we want to do the best we can on what we think is the right time, and it's for you to make the final decision, but you will be talking with your broker and probably with Willard here in town. But anyway, she said that when the right time came, she called New York and sold $800,000 worth of stock, which went into purchase a cash purchase on the newspaper. Another time she said, this is when the Honeywells were down in Florida. She said, I talked 3 times to Miami and twice to New York City this afternoon. I feel kind of flattered. I have some nice pictures of the house down. Have you ever seen it?
No, have you been there?
No, I haven't.
I've never been. I've been over this house with
I've been over to the new house.
Petty,
but
But you told me something rather interesting continuation of this Bond story, and that's the interesting part.
Okay.
What happened afterwards?
Well, let's tie Bernice's cancer situation into this. And 1970, Bernice, my daughter's 71. In in the early spring of 1970, it seemed that Bernice was going to have trouble, and she was afraid it was going to be cancer, and by the middle of March, we knew it was. She had an operation which should correct the chance of further cancer, and we thought it was that way. And at this time, we talked about selling my store. And I'd get out of the store, and at least I could be with her if she needed companion. And what would we, whether she was as bad as we thought or wasn't bad at all, anyway, we started talking about selling the store and changing our whole way of life. Maybe she'd even quit her job. So she had an operation and was soon back to work. And we went on then through the early part of the summer, and in the latter part of July, she had a seizure again. And this time it was a rather serious growth. So she had further operation and went to cobalt. By this time we know that it doesn't look very good for her. And Bernice was very realistic. She said, we have stock in IBM and Honeywell and some other companies, and during our life, I've been the bookkeeper for us personally, and she said, if you're going to be in the stock business, you got to worry about long-term gains and short-term gains and things like that, and your experience isn't sufficient to really be concerned about that. Why don't we just dispose of this stock? And we'll put it in the bank and I'll just simply North Dakota. Now, this was in 1971. So we did. Now, we sold our IBM stock for $342. We sold our Honeywell stock for $142. We sold our Melville shoe for $32, which we bought at $18. We bought the Honeywell for whatever we could. I don't remember, but Honeywell is now about 30.
Right.
IBM yesterday morning was 205. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is a time that's what ignorance is bliss, is folly to be wise.
Yeah.
I'm able to go into retirement, which I have from the day I sold my store, and I intend to stay there. But had it been that was hung on to this stock, I'd been out working right now.
Yeah.
I would have lost 50%.
But didn't, I still don't think that you got the point of the story that we wanted about the time you went to the broker in New York and you wanted to either buy stock or sell stock, and as a courtesy to you and Bernice for the dealings.
Well, yeah, if you want that.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of the story.
Yeah, probably. Well, if let me go back to our little story about the purchase of the newspaper, a sizable
$800,000, whatever.
deal that the brokerage house had handled for the newspaper. Bernice, by this time, was very familiar with certain fellows in this brokerage house that used to come out to Wabash occasionally. And after this well, I don't think that we were ever invested very much money anyway until after that time. Which, now I want you to know I've got a lot of money, I don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, what we did invest, the brokerage house was so thankful for the Honeywell business that they didn't charge Bernice a cent for buying or selling.
Yeah.
And that meant quite a bit to us. Now, we had
You had mutual funds and you weren't going to...
we had mutual funds that were on a 10-year basis that we kind of thought as a savings and nest egg for our retirement. And we saw that we felt anyway the percentage wasn't good enough. So Bernice said she would just sell. So it was my okay. I mean, it was my agreement that we just close that out, and then she would invest it in some with some company through this brokerage house. So she told them what she had to put in there, which was to us a lot of money. And they came up with this buying Melville shoe. The guy said, "Now you ain't gonna even think this is any good at all. But he said, you're asking our advice, and I said, okay. So we stuck it on Melville Shoe, which turned out to be the best thing we had.
Yeah.
Of course, we had more money probably in that than anything else. We didn't have a whole lot of idea, but gosh, $334 a share.
Yeah. Did Melville Shoe eventually fall apart like everything
Yeah,
else?
it's down to 10.
Yeah.
Melville Shoe is 10.
So really, you were selling out at the top then.
Couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
It just turned out that because of my experience, I had never had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know the stockbrokers at all.
Yeah.
So they sold the stock, sent the money back here, no charge. They said that they really owed her some consideration too. Which I thought was great for us. But you know, until I left the Gambles and got into Glacier and Bernice went with Mrs. Honeywell, that's when our ship seemed to come in a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't too long till we remodeled the house, and we spent more money remodeling. We paid for it.
Yeah.
And put in new furniture. The first year I worked for Glacier, he gave me $1,000 worth of furniture, just like that.
Did
He gave it to me.
yeah. Bernice must have had a rather unique relationship then with Mrs. Honeywell. It must have been
She Bernice worked up until only about a month before she died. She just truly did. She got to the place where Mrs. Honeywell would say, I want to write a letter to the governor, and I want to say so and so. And that's all she'd say. You go write it. And Bernice could put it in about the same kind of language that she would understand. She did that for a number of years. And of course, she did a lot of work on her music. You know, Miss Honeywell she set up a whole system for her music. Spent months on that. Went up the house. Worked on that for months. And of course, she was in the offices as they changed from one place to the other.
Was she was working for Mrs. Honeywell then when Mark died?
Oh, yes.
Did she get involved directly with any of the details, or?
No. She went with Mrs. Honeywell to Florida when they closed the house, and she helped with the listings and was set up for this disposition of all the things there by one man or means, because some of it went to the University of Miami and some came back here. Of the goods that they didn't need. You see, there's a lot of things she didn't want. I think there was some tax. Bernice got to be a real top tax expert. She really did. She studied taxes. They used to have Howard Plummer do their taxes on their statements for the company. Bernice did that. After 2 years there. Didn't have him at all. And then they eventually had George S. Olive as final authority, but she would send the statements down there. Hardly ever would they touch anything.
Yeah.
They were surprised. Everybody knows that much. But she truly studied. Every new tax book came along, she knew how to interpret it. I mean, you can read that stuff, but can you interpret it?
Yeah. Did she ever travel with Mrs. Honeywell then to New York? Or
No, she never did. Never went anywhere with her at all.
Did she have much to do with Mark, or was he pretty well out of the picture by the time she got there?
Well, no. About the only thing there where Mark was concerned that Bernice would address her Christmas cards, which was a month's work.
Yeah. Would it take that long?
Darn near it.
Yeah.
Well, with her work, I mean, she'd be working on it a month. It wouldn't take a month steady, you know, because after all, she did. That's about the only thing she ever did with Mark.
Did Bernice died, of course, before Mrs. Honeywell did?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was Mrs. Honeywell's reaction then? Did she replace? I don't think she ever replaced her, did she?
Well, what we have to say that she tried. Well, you might say several girls in that position, and they just didn't find somebody that was.
Yeah, I think that she had been with Bernice so long that I don't think there would have been anybody that ever pleased her from then on.
I doubt it. I doubt it. It was just great. I remember just one little thing that happened. Miss Honeywell had been over in the Eastern Mediterranean, and I believe that she got up into the area of Czechoslovakia. And the planes one specific friend of hers that was up in Vermont. I remember we were sitting at the table at noon on Sunday. The phone rings. Miss Honeywell, I'm over somewhere in Czechoslovakia, and I need to reset all of my schedule on an airlines from here on home, and I want you to do it for. They were on their way home, but anyway, whatever the plan was, it was completely thrown out. Mm-hmm. And they had to start over again. Bernice worked for 2 days on that thing.
I'll be there.
You
She
know,
called her from Europe just to fix her
and
schedule.
then Bernice set it all up and finally had the tickets waiting at a certain desk in Europe for her. Yeah. Another time, Mrs. Honeywell called from Greece. We're sitting at the table and the phone rings, and she said, Bernice, you can believe this. The money I had you get is laying on my dressing table up in my house, and I haven't a cent.
Yeah.
She's an aunt that said that.
Yeah. She had to cable her some money.
Put that somewhere else. She was with the people that had the channel for
Sarkis Tarzan.
Sarkis Tarzan. Yeah. I think one of the Ball sisters. Anyway, they picked her up in a plane, flew up to Chicago, and then flew direct to Athens from Chicago.
Did you share in some of this excitement and everything, phone calls from Europe and everything? Did you obviously must have been a happy marriage if you.
Well, there was one thing that Mrs. Honeywell had, for some reason, undue confidence in what I might know. Because many times they were talking about stuff I didn't even want to know. I would go with them when they stop off at the house. She went up there every night with a briefcase, and sometimes we went to the house. We went to have cocktails. She invited me in for just cocktails. And she'd start talking about something. I say, well, I'll go on out the car. And she said, no need for that, Duane. No need for that. So she probably felt that Bernice probably told me some things that was rather personal, you know. And I was as much in her confidence. She didn't ask my advice there, but she'd often tell me some stuff that, God, I almost wish she hadn't. Because there weren't very many people who knew that, maybe. You know, she said things that in front of me, and Bernice could talk freely in front of me. Of course, well, there was one thing about it. For Bernice to live and do the things for Mrs. Honeywell, she had to deny me a few things.
Sure.
Because of the devotion. But with the great help that she did for me, and all my life she was an inspiration and a provider along with myself, and she was able to make contacts that I just couldn't have. And I'm talking about in the business sense of the personal part of it. It was just great to have a person like her. And she thought she had a great mind, good reader, all to the good things and in Wabash, and it gave me just a great feeling to be a part of her life. Really, it did. Don't get a chance to say it very often because most people are jealous anyway, and they don't want to hear that. They'd rather hear rotten dirt and stuff like that said about people. But I would never say anything bad about Bernice. It was too bad she had to die so young. See, she would be 58 years old when she died. Her 59th birthday was just, she died 4 days, I guess, before her 59th birthday.
Do you two, was there any reason, maybe this is too personal, was there any reason you didn't have any children, Duane?
There's no reason at all. None at all. It just didn't happen.
Was this ever a subject of discussion?
Well, yes, it was probably at first. You know, things were so darn tough for both of us when we were young. We thought, well, let's get started before we get a family. You know, once in a while that happens. And you don't get going fast enough, and a child doesn't slip in on you. See, that's probably the thing. And then after we got a little older, we thought, well, doggone it, you are missing something, aren't you?
Yeah.
So then that's where Jerry Meeker came into the picture.
Who was he?
Well, he was just Bernice's nephew, the guy that just died. She, Jerry's mother died 8 years before Bernice did. So she was kind of a mother to those two boys, although they were both adults, and one was married, but the other one wasn't. The younger one was, of the two nephews, was married. But when Jerry was in high school, Bernice used to encourage him and visit a lot with him and correspond a lot with him. And then he went to Jamestown College, and then he wanted to go up to the dorm and be part of the college. His mother didn't want to and couldn't afford it. Bernice let him have some money, and then after he graduated from college, the 4 years he wanted to go on to law school, which was 3 years more, and Bernice backed him going to Michigan, and she kind of took him on as, for the child she didn't have. And then when she was gone and he was on his deathbed last year, it was kind of that way with me. I spent 4 months with the guy when he was incapacitated.
What happened to him? You told me.
Cancer.
That seems to be so young. That's
41.
Yeah.
See, he was married late in life, this nephew did. And now he has a child, 5, and another one, 7.
Yeah.
His widow is 36.
Duane?
That would have been what family we have. The other nephew, we were good to him too and helped him out. Of course, they both got good jobs, so pay us back. Fine there. But they didn't have to kiss their folks hind end. That was probably, they probably could have somehow got money from the folks too. But they went through the Depression like the rest of us, and they raised the kids. We didn't raise anything but a horse and a couple of cats, and they knew that things were going good for us. They were.
We're getting ready to close out here. Realize we've been talking for almost 3 hours. Well, we'll edit this. You'll edit it down when they get finished typing. But let's conclude by what outstanding contribution would you say that Mr. and Mrs. Honeywell, and I use her first since Bernice was the one closer to her, what would you say their outstanding contributions are to the community and what we enjoy?
Well, the outstanding contributions really is through both of them, because it's the Honeywell Center. And in the Honeywell Center, if people would read the paper and keep a scorecard on all the good things that the Honeywell Foundation has done, it's tremendous in this town. When I first came here, they were just finishing the center, and it was just delightful to go there. And we heard a lot of nice things said about it, but it usually was people that, I don't mean the top and most prominent people in Wabash, but the general run of people, and the worker was running the place down and stuff. I heard a lot of wrong things said about it. But every time I talked to somebody that came to Wabash and saw that beautiful, beautiful building, and then what later came, they think that we're the luckiest town in the state of Indiana, and I feel that way. And to me, that's the contribution that is just really something. Now, you know that a certain amount of funds go into the Wabash Valley, and the swimming pool out here, and that's just too, there's no end to the things that, and then people, if they're planning a project, they got one eye on the Honeywell Center to see if they won't give them a boost too, and all the good that comes out of that building. Just all of the good that does. I've had just, myself personally, Bernice has, and good share of my friends have enjoyed the good things that have been connected with and out of the Honeywell Center itself. And Mark, of course, built the building and endowed the thing, and she took it over in a masterful way, I think, when he was gone. And I think it's whether the one battle now is what's going to happen in Congress and if they wreck foundations. But until that happens, we've got a giant on our hands that's on our side just because of the two of them. We'll miss her, but then we feel that she was able to set up a good board to carry on what when she left, and I think Mark figured she'd carry on when he left.
Yeah.
And I think that's the greatest thing I could say about them, that I loved them both, especially her.
Well, here we are. We've taken you from the North Dakota prairies to Wabash and retirement, and I want to thank you because this has been just a great evening, and we'll get this down on paper, and you can edit it and revise it and correct it and so forth. And
A great evening. It just, I didn't know I could think of this.
yeah, good. I appreciate it. And this is George Dingledye.